If commencement speeches are meant to prepare grads for the world they're about to dive into, Scott Pelley essentially told them, no more life jackets for you.
Our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack. And insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes, and into our private thoughts. The fear to speak in America.
The 60 Minutes host was brutally real about the state of America, one that there is some evidence to back up. But despite their affinity for free speech, MAGA didn't want to hear it.
Scott's still a whiny, liberal, and still bitter, oblivious to the fact that it was the legacy media's lazy, agenda-driven coverage that helped create the very conditions that he now blames Trump for, like censorship and racial hatred.
I'm not sure what speech she was watching. However, it is interesting to me that first of all, things must be very bad at 60 Minutes to see these CBS anchors who are normally pretty calm going this far. But also, it's interesting that people like, Laura Ingraham are totally fine with Trump saying, we are going to shake down a news organization because I don't like you.
Yeah.
Which is what's happening here. And because I want you to say certain things. I want you to report a certain way.
Well, embarrassingly, I missed this speech because I was hooked watching Donald Trump's commencement address to West Point, where he talked about trophy wives. So I thought that was much more interesting.
Another blockbuster commencement address.
Where was 60 Minutes, actually? I haven't spent enough time really studying this to know where 60 Minutes was on the Biden story, on Biden's health, actually. And also, I actually think...
They were where everybody else was. Nowhere.
Okay. So,
is my view.
And I also, here we all are. It's Saturday morning. We're all arguing with each other. I don't think we feel any fear about speaking out, do we? I actually think what this has unleashed is a ton of journalists who feel very confident in speaking out, which doesn't mean that corporations...
That's not true.
Well, I think corporations that own certain journalistic organizations are putting different kind of pressure on them.
Sure.
But I think America is full of people who are speaking out about this issue.
I disagree. I think the conversations have been, how do I approach it? How do I keep my job? I do a lot of different speaking engagements. I hold a podcast. I did a conversation with, one athlete who was on the right, one athlete who was on the left. They're terrified to speak. They don't want their owners are saying, the bosses, the people who own these teams, whether it be a football team or a basketball team, are saying, put your head down. You don't need to be a part of it. I think people forget about wartime journalism. I was having a conversation with a good friend of ours, and Jamel, she was like, this is the time where you do this wartime journalism, where you just really roll your sleeves up and you get into the knit and the grit. But for fear of losing a job, but for fear of not being able to pay your bills, people are walking a very fine line. I am 100% in agreement with what he said. When he said, make the truth seekers live in fear. If you're suing my network that I am currently employed by, and I don't even mention your name, i.e. Donald Trump, in this entire speech, but I sent everyone on the right up in arms, then I know that I'm right there where I need to be. He didn't even mention his name because he knows he also is living in fear in some sort of way. Everything that he spoke about was his life.
You both might be right in a certain way. I mean, I think there's been a lot of incredible reporting from places that you would expect conciliatory reporting. The Wall Street Journal does great reporting. Even the Washington Post, under a lot of pressure from their owner to change their coverage, has not. They continue to cover Trump. However, what is happening at 60 Minutes is different because Trump is suing them, and they do want this merger, and they're about to settle with him, reportedly. And the reporting evidence is overwhelmingly that the pressure from the owners who want this merger to go through is to go soft on Trump, because Trump has explicitly threatened putting his regulatory officials in a position where they could stop this from happening.
Yeah, well, they're trying to settle their litigation issues so they can make this business transaction. I mean, it's not unusual for corporations to do that. I listened to the Pelley speech.
Scott, I'm just, your summary of that is not quite accurate.
It's not accurate that businesses settle litigation in order to make business transactions go through?
Hold on. It's a private lawsuit between Donald Trump and 60 Minutes, right? Trump, as president, is saying that the government is going to, on his private behest, stop a company from doing a business transaction because he wants it. That's different from settling, legal disputes before you go into a merger or an acquisition. That's Trump using the government to go after a company so that he can get dollars out of it, millions and millions of dollars. I mean, that's a completely different set of facts here.
Look, I know he sued them because he believes he was treated unfairly, or they treated Kamala Harris's interview unfairly and tried to put their thumb on the scale of the presidential election. They're having conversations about settling it. We'll see how it shakes out. I actually think he has a point about it. And if you've watched 60 Minutes for 5 minutes over the last several years, you would know it's not fair. I mean, this is one of the shows. This is one of the outlets that conservatives would point to most often to say, this is the state of American journalism. It's only here to try to hurt Republicans, hurt conservatives, hurt Donald Trump. I mean, Alyssa, you worked in this field for many years. That is the prevailing attitude among conservatives. But on the free speech issue, I don't know what America Scott Pelley is living in. We have more speech now than ever. I mean, you just said you're doing all kinds of speaking engagements and podcasts, and I salute you. You're speaking all the time. There is no problem with free speech in America. What we do have a problem with are people who don't speak truthfully, who are interested more in narratives than truth, and who are using what used to be journalism for activism. We do have a problem with that.
That happens.
But there's no ban on free speech. The free speech problems came in the last administration.
We didn't say there was a ban on free speech. What he said was there are people who want to tell the truth feel like they cannot tell the truth. We see this all the time, everywhere, and you know that. People are living in fear.
I actually see it
Who is
totally
not telling the
differently.
truth?
I actually think Trump tends to create the golden era of American journalism. I think that journalists find their backbones when he's in office. I think in the first term they were relentless in covering him. I think this term they are. I think there's something very different about having sort of a corporate fear because your overlords may not allow you to pursue those stories. But I do think we can't ignore the Biden of it. There is a real feeling that a major U.S. news story that had impacts on the entire country was just not covered with the same scrutiny that if it was happening in a Trump administration would have. That's the reality. But
why? And why didn't they cover it? What's the answer? Because everybody knows, you could say it. The answer is because
you could say,
media is geared.
You could say that for Fox News. You
could
could
say
say
that
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 for
is true, though.
You could say Fox News doesn't cover it. Scott, what are you talking about? Everybody does it. Everybody does it.
Can we just ask what's happening on The View? Because you've had corporate pressure at The View, right? We reported this at the Daily Beast,
So,
that
to
you
be
were
honest,
asked not to talk about Trump as much.
That reporting did not reflect what I witnessed in that meeting by any means. And what I'll say is this, I've always believed that the show should reflect what Barbara Walters intended for it to be. Women of different backgrounds, different political viewpoints, different ages, generations, talking about a wide variety of issues. No one at ABC, at Disney, has ever suggested to me or anyone that I know of my co-hosts that we need to go easier or harder on Trump.